Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because you at the start said, right, you chip in, James, right,
Well,
make
chip
sure
in
it's a conversation. And then I do. And you go, if you just let me finish what I was saying.
I hadn't realised I interrupted you.
Did you notice that error?
I was just trying to keep the flow going. Okay, right. Well, you go. You go.
The world of B2B marketing, sales and service tech is moving fast. This podcast will cut through the hype, the hidden agendas and bullshit advice in search of the truth to help you make more informed decisions.
The Forrester Wave report on revenue marketing platforms that came out at the end of July was something that caught our attention, raised quite a lot of interesting issues and certainly considerations for our clients and obviously the wider sales and marketing community, particularly those making decisions around investment in technology. And we know that there's a lot of sort of focus right now on the future of tech, and I think we can see the direction of travel for a lot of these platforms is definitely going to necessitate people to reevaluate what they've got. And I think the report that came out talks about, and you can probably build on this, but in very short summary, it talks about the way that tech has evolved over the last few years. You've got these sort of central marketing automation platforms that do a lot of the general day-to-day execution of activity to help you run your marketing program online and manage all your digital channels, manage your website, etc. And then you've got, which obviously more relevant to the world we live in, which is B2B. You've got these ABM platforms that provide more sophisticated ways of engaging with target accounts, with multiple buyers, etc.
Like 6 Sense and Demand Base.
Yeah.
What the report says is that at the minute, clients and organizations are needing to have basically dual investment in those two different systems, because for any B2B enterprise marketing and sales function, you'd need to have an advanced capability in ABM, ABX, and you also need to have the centralized platform that you mentioned to run your email automation, your marketing automation generally, host your website, and run your marketing program.
But if you are, as many larger enterprises are, that they want to have that kind of dual approach where they're running a demand generation program, but they want to have a dedicated focus on a smaller set of accounts, and they want that level of sophistication to manage that, then they will choose a platform like Demand Base. But I think because of this convergence that Forrester talk about, and this sort of now move to more of a single platform, if we're going down the single platform route, then it requires a lot more consideration than maybe buyers of the past have taken when they've purchased various different forms of tech. If they're, as we went to an event last year, the B2B Martech event, there was a stat that someone shared where, the typical marketing operation in a large enterprise, there's something like 120 plus different tools and platforms that marketeers have invested in. Clearly that's not sustainable longer term, but it's much easier to buy specific tools for a particular need and get that through without extensive approval. Whereas if you're going to go down the route of a single platform that's going to do a lot more, it's going to be more expensive, and it's going to require a lot more evaluation, and you need to look at things not just in the here and now and what your current needs are. You've really got to think about the future. And I think what was useful in the report is it kind of points to the direction of travel for a lot of these vendors.
Yeah, and points towards their current strengths and weaknesses. And it's clear that, and it's obvious that a dedicated ABM, ABX platform like Demand Base is going to be much stronger in servicing that particular need. But for a demand gen program, a platform like HubSpot is going to be head and shoulders above something like Demand Base, naturally. And the convergence that they're talking about is not only important because of that kind of needs and meeting those needs, but also because, as you said, choosing a platform now, which is going to in the future enable you to do both of those things in a unified platform, also solves some of the pain points that people have when they have that dual investment. The obvious one is that they're spending more money than they probably would on a unified platform because there is some level of overlapping functionality. But the other, as we know quite intimately, having run a project to help fix this problem recently, is the necessity to integrate those platforms, which comes with a whole host of headaches, and often requires, in some cases, such as the one that we've worked on recently, quite complex and technical solutions to fixing what in a unified platform wouldn't be an issue at all. And so ultimately there's a level of pain now in having that dual approach, which I think is driving that conversion point, because people will want a unified platform that can do both of these things, but none of those platforms as it stands are able to service their clients across both of those two key disciplines. And so the point that you're making there is that choosing the right platform now to put your eggs into, basically putting your eggs in one basket, if you want to think of it that way, is the right thing to do to future-proof your investment.
It's really about backing the right horse now, isn't it? And I think the report that Forrester produced, whilst very good, very comprehensive, it doesn't really compare apples with apples. A lot of these products are very different, and their product roadmaps and strategies are very different. So you can't really compare HubSpot with 6th Sense, because it is a very different platform. HubSpot is...
Well, 6th Sense does what it does very well, and HubSpot does what it does very well. The problem is there is not a platform out there that does both what HubSpot does very well and what 6th Sense does very well. And that's the point of conversion.
But they're all plotted on the same revenue marketing platform quadrant, if you like. And I think, if we were to talk through the main 3 or 4 vendors that are positioned in the top right as the leaders, I think maybe that will give some insight to people that are now thinking about the future strategy. So we mentioned HubSpot. That's obviously building out its capability across marketing, sales and service, with its various different hubs. It's got a very advanced now website platform as well. So really the HubSpot suite, if you want to call it that, is allowing an organization to manage all of its interaction engagements with customers, and it's also got CRM. So it's a far different platform to 6th Sense, which 6th Sense is much more about being a tool that harnesses data and uses analytics and AI to model your kind of ideal customer, find more of those, and also look at where those potential accounts are in the buyer journey to pinpoint those that may be more ready to buy. So it's a very advanced set of analytics and AI, which again you don't find in HubSpot. So the big question, I suppose, for me is, are HubSpot going to get there sooner and build that capability into their current suite? I certainly think that's probably more likely the case than 6th Sense building out all of its...
I think they're better placed to, that's for sure, because of course they've got to build on... they've got to essentially recreate what 6th Sense has done and bolt that onto a platform which is much broader already. For 6th Sense to build out all the functionality that HubSpot has in Service Hub, the website platform, the sales platform, and the more advanced elements of the marketing platform, where there is some overlap with 6th Sense in the automation capabilities that 6th Sense has, then they've got a lot further to go in that journey to be competing with HubSpot across the board. Whether HubSpot has the desire or the intention to build out that ABM functionality, I guess time will tell.
I would be interested to get 6th Sense take on it, but I don't see them. I can't imagine their strategies to become like HubSpot. It wouldn't
make any sense.
Wouldn't make any sense. So this is where acquisitions will come into play potentially. But
obviously, as we know, HubSpot doesn't do that.
It builds its platform from the ground up.
And this was one of the things that struck me when I was reading the Gartner report. Sorry, the Forrester report. In the analysis of platforms other than HubSpot, they were often praising you say, for example, the Salesforce system. They were praising the fact that the Salesforce CRM is well integrated with what used to be called Pardot, it's now called something different. And that to me seems ridiculous when comparing it to HubSpot. You know, that's a point of criticism for me, that there's even an integration that's required there in the first place. And so it's probably, in my view, more likely that a platform like Salesforce may go and buy something like Demandbase or 6sense and bolt that onto their existing platform. But where that's a questionable choice for people, therefore thinking, okay, well, we'll go with Salesforce because they're highly acquisitive, they might buy something like that, bolt it on, is that you end up with all the same pains that I talked about earlier. You end up still having to integrate your Salesforce CRM, as you have to with Pardot already, with whatever they end up calling 6sense or Demandbase, whatever they look to acquire.
I mean, it's like Salesforce strategy is just to acquire all these different tools and make them available to customers, but then the customers themselves have got to figure out how to make the most of them. You know, with expensive consultants, lots of customization. You know, they've got Tableau, they've got MuleSoft, and I think they just announced their results.
Yeah.
Slack. That seems like an interesting acquisition. Doesn't necessarily fit with the revenue marketing strategy, but still a great, fantastic tool. But I think the Salesforce approach very, very different to HubSpot. I think I was just about to say, Salesforce have recently announced their results, and I think the thing that's driving their growth is those analytical tools. Obviously 6sense is growing as well, and it shows that maybe that's a really key area that people are looking for now to make the most of. And we know that maybe is a weakness in HubSpot's suite right now. Certainly from a B2B ABM perspective.
Yeah, but I suppose the point I'm making is that you could buy Tableau and integrate it with HubSpot as easily as you could with Pardot.
There's no
benefit.
Yeah, there's no benefit in going down that route, really, with Salesforce.
All your eggs in the Salesforce basket, in my view, is, you know, you might have a more consolidated billing structure. And in fairness, the integrations between platforms in Salesforce's ecosystem will be made more easier.
Yeah.
Than they will with third-party platforms.
It's probably more of a more favourable licensing model where you're going to get discount. We know that, you know, if an organisation buys Salesforce, quite often they get Pardot thrown in for free or heavily discounted. So there's some benefits from that perspective. But it's, you know, but ultimately it's got to be about how you're using the system, and if it's all fully integrated and all built in the same platform, it's far easier to use. You haven't got data silos, and you haven't got different skill sets required. So it does feel that HubSpot is in a very good position now to sort of capitalize on this future trend.
It does. But I suppose there are question marks there around whether that is the direction of travel that they would wish to go down. Because HubSpot is a platform not just for B2B, not just for those that have ABM as part of their programs, but for a broader range of different organizations than say 6sense or Demandbase. I think if I had to make a bet on how that might work, is that ABM, and we have no knowledge of this, I should be really clear about that, could become another optional hub, as Service Hub as Content Hub has. Because ultimately, if you were a HubSpot customer that didn't have ABM in your program, and lots of people that have HubSpot don't, I think that will get less and less over time, particularly within the B2B space. But for those that aren't enterprise level, and therefore don't have the bags of cash that are required to take a really dedicated ABM approach, they won't want to see HubSpot invest in what is probably tens of millions of dollars in the platform to build its ABM functionality, only for them not to need it and their bills to go up and ultimately having to pay extra for something that they don't need.
It's sort of this. It's really down to the maturity and level of sophistication of the buyer. If you're an organisation that would really prefer ease of use and a platform, it's not even integrated, it's built together, it's all one platform, you don't really have to think about integration. Everything's all there. If that is more important to you than having a really sophisticated ABM technology in place, or If you look at other elements that HubSpot's building out around service, I mean, service again, strong functionality in the service suite, but it's not kind of comparable to what we might know or might see a managed service provider have in house, like a ConnectWise that's highly focused on managing, tickets and the whole
exactly
service
the
desk.
same.
And
good
it's the same.
comparison,
It's
'cause
the same with
with-
websites as well, with the headless kind of.
Yeah, and it would be the same with ABM, I think.
Yeah,
because there's always going to be a specialist out there that can do
really advanced
an individual
shit.
thing in a much more advanced way than a platform that is more broad like HubSpot. But the question that you have to ask there, and CMOs will be asking this question now, is whether we need that level of advanced functionality. And most of the time, the answer is no. You have to be in the top 1% of, or top 5% of organizations that are running ABM programs at scale and with a really sophisticated approach to need some of this really advanced functionality that comes with tools like 6 Sense.
Yeah.
And because of that advanced functionality, the other thing that doesn't get mentioned,
Bless you, by the way.
I think it does in the Forrester report, that 6 Sense obviously comes with a massive price tag. Now, if you're going to have to invest in that and in a platform like HubSpot, then it focuses the mind even further on whether you need all the additional functionality that it brings. And I hope in time that HubSpot brings in an ABM hub that enables some of this more advanced functionality around data and around modeling of accounts and around buying groups, that gives that level of functionality to people that are using HubSpot in a way that is not coming with the price tag that 6 Sense does.
Yeah, I mean, if you go down the advanced route, it's typically the platforms are building these advanced capabilities because they're targeting enterprise customers, and they know that they can basically command a premium price if they do that. But it's a trade-off, isn't it? If you go down that route, then you're going to have this really, really advanced set of features and functionality. You're paying a premium price for it. But as we know, it's evidenced every year from Gartner when they do their utilization of MarTech analysis, it's actually going down every year. And I still think it's quite a low percentage of, if you look at all the tools and features available in a advanced platform, only a fraction of them are being used. And that trend is going down, not up. So continually organizations are buying this stuff and they're probably not using it to its full potential. Whereas, and that leads to other knock-on impacts in terms of low adoption across the users, and limited integration because you've got these really advanced tools that don't necessarily integrate as well. So it's a trade-off between that really advanced functionality versus something that is much easier to use, is all in one, and is going to have higher adoption across those different teams. And it gives those teams the ability to collaborate better as well. And I think that's the big decision I think people need to make longer term. What is most important?
Yeah, and if people do conclude that we want to run an ABM program, we want a consolidated unified system because we've got all of these headaches with integration. We don't want to have to spend eye-watering sums on platforms like 6 Sense and Demand Base, but we do want some more advanced ABM functionality. Then choosing a platform like HubSpot makes a lot of sense. I think if you do need that advanced functionality, you do want to stretch a platform like 6 Sense or Demand Base to its limits, then you've got, I suppose, two choices, and that's to stick with what we've got now, which is a dual approach, or to throw your eggs into the 6 Sense basket in the hope that they do, and I doubt that they will, but bring in some of the capability that means you might be able to run some of your other demand gen activities through that platform too.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that's how we would advise that decision is made. Where ultimately comes down to where you believe your focus and your investment is going to go into predominantly in the future. If it's very heavily into ABM and ABX, and for some it really is, then choosing a platform to sit at the center of your organization such as Sixth Sense or demand based, may be a wise choice. I suspect that's a very small percentage of
we're just at
the
the
market.
just at the very early stages of all this convergence, aren't we? I think but I think it's quite clear what would be a real game changer, given, if we look at all the different platforms. As you said, if HubSpot came out with an ABM hub, that would be a real game changer. If it could even get close to some of the functionality that is offered by Sixth Sense.
50% of the functionality of one of those platforms, then for many that's sufficient, and it would absolutely be a game changer.
But can HubSpot sort of compete on all fronts? Can it then invest in a commerce platform that it's obviously starting to build out commerce?
Yeah.
Is that going to compete with Shopify, for example?
It never will, and that's the point.
So
there's always going to be a specialist out there that can do what a platform like HubSpot does, but in a much more advanced and specialist way. And that is the nature of it. What we're talking about here is the fact that most people don't need the upper tiers of that sophistication within their programs. Most people would be perfectly fulfilled with a 50% of what demand-based can do type platform, which is absolutely where HubSpot would be.
Yeah. That's probably a good place to wrap up.
Well, what we didn't talk about, Craig, was why that convergence is happening from a marketing perspective. It's clearly happening from a technology perspective, but what's driving that change? What's driving the convergence?
Unmet needs, frustrations.
But why are organisations now more focused on ABM and ABX than they ever have been before? Because that's ultimately what's necessitating this change. People have been running demand gen programs for donkey's years, and beginning to automate those.
You could argue that people are running ABM programs for donkey's years as well. But I think what's maybe changing is, it goes back to some of the earlier podcasts we've talked about, in terms of demand gen and how that's measured.
Mm-hmm.
And undoubtedly, ABM is more effective if it's done well.
Yeah.
And yes, some of these advanced tools now are, particularly with Sixth Sense, are enabling you to really make more use of data through AI.
Which helps surface up those accounts which are actually a good fit for you, and actually interested in what you're having to say, and therefore you can target your efforts from, say, for example, a BDR team on those which actually give a shit what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's more timely interactions.
More timely, and they're actually probably going to pick up the phone and listen to what you've got to say because you've identified that they are interested in what you're talking about through a platform like demand-based. And of course, that's not the only thing that it does. But in contrast to the traditional demand gen approach, whereby someone visits a webinar and they instantly get a phone call from a BDR, as we've talked about, that is no longer going to work in the way that it has traditionally in the past. And so I think it comes out of a realization that our traditional demand gen MQL generation approach is not going to be as effective in the future, as we talked about on previous podcasts, which then raises the question, what is going to be as effective? And I think a lot of people, even those which weren't necessarily early adopters of ABM, have determined that more dedicated, targeted approach to those that actually show interest in their business beyond, a registration for a singular webinar is the right way to go. And I think that is leading more people to adopt ABM, ABX platforms, and which is therefore raising the profile of this discussion, in that there's more people in that position of having the dual system, whereby they're investing in two systems. They've got the headache of integrating two systems. They've got the siloed nature of the teams that operate on those two systems. And therefore, this conversation is coming up more and more frequently, which I think is driving that convergence. Because, of course, platforms like HubSpot, demand-based Sixth Sense are also hearing this debate happen. Maybe not this specific one, because
well, who knows? But absolutely. I mean, they're listening to customers. They're seeing what people are asking for, and they're adapting to that as always. I mean, that's how these vendors continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it's interesting, some of the acquisitions that Salesforce have made, because again, AI reporting analytics definitely probably one of the weaker areas in a lot of these platforms.
Yeah, and we're a HubSpot Platinum partner, but HubSpot included. I don't think we'd shy away from the fact that some of the reporting capability in HubSpot, despite
for,
the fact
for B2B and for
a very specific ABM use case, and for B2B in general, if we're being honest. Is sometimes a challenge in HubSpot for some specific reasons, because it is a platform that's built for many, and there are some use cases where it falls short from a reporting perspective. I think we can be clear about that. So absolutely, there is that challenge around reporting with HubSpot.
So shall we wrap up then? Maybe just summarise the sort of key things from that discussion, because as always, we start with a sort of hypothesis, and it kind of probably where we end up is somewhere different. I think we probably started by thinking interesting report points to this convergence between these two different disciplines, if you like, and that it's much needed. But I think
we ended up with it's like unlikely to happen anytime soon.
Absolutely, I think we're just at the very start of that journey, and I think what Forrester's tried to do is maybe put together a lot of different vendors that are very different, and try and group them in a standard kind of category, which I still think is very kind of embryonic stages, if you want to say that.
I think what they're trying to do is start the conversation around this, and I think that what the report very much does well is highlight the fact that
the strengths and weaknesses of the different vendors.
Yeah, exactly. And not a single one of them achieves all of the aims of a modern B2B RevOps. Are we going to use the...
We're back there again.
RevOps function. And ultimately, that's where we are. And we've talked at length about the likelihood of that happening. I think it won't happen soon, but nonetheless, even in investment in a platform like HubSpot, or in Salesforce, or to a lesser extent Demandbase or 6 Sense, now is going to mean that ultimately you're going to be investing a lot of time, money, skills in that specific platform. And it still makes sense, I think, that CMOs keep their eye on this development within the marketing industry and try to predict where those platforms may
I think
end
that's what I was going to say. I think probably what the report lacks is just that level of insight into what the strategies of these vendors actually are over the next 3 to 5 years. So if HubSpot were to say in that report that actually ABM is going to be a key focus for us, we're going to launch an ABM hub, then that's obviously going to give some assurances to buyers that maybe that's the right horse to back. And equally, same could be said of the other vendors. What is their product roadmap? I think what the report really mainly focuses on Forrester's take on the platforms as they are, with some clues as to who might win this race.
And what that does do, even if it's for now, is help you determine where your priorities are from a sales and marketing perspective, and choose a platform which meets your needs now. And I don't think you can do anything other than that at this point, unless you're willing to have a two-system approach, which, as we've talked about at length, many clients are having to choose through there not being another option.